What's up guys, Sanjay Shenoy here from Team Pixel Track and welcome to this brand new video in Content Marketing Mastery. Let's do a quick recap. In the previous video, we learned everything about grammar and we also learned why it is so important to know about grammar and ensure that you don't make any kind of grammatical mistakes. What are the different parts of speech, the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, adverbs, and everything in between. We learned what they are and how they are used to form sentences. We also learned about the different tenses of verbs. If it might have seemed a little complicated in the previous video, it can be a little overwhelming in the beginning, but it's very important that you know the different tenses and how to use them, because we will be covering in this particular video how we mess this up and why it sounds so wrong when you mess it up. So I strongly suggest you go back and watch that part of the previous video, if you have got confused, and just go through over it again. And I strongly suggest you do your own research and try to understand about the different tenses of verbs yourself. And we also learned about all the important punctuation marks and how to use them, what is the correct way to use them, and what are the mistakes that we do while we are using them. Very excited about this video. This video is how not to sound like a non-native writer. I have done a ton of research on this particular topic over the past few months, and whatever you see here is purely based on my research. I'm saying this because, again, this is not like a scientifically backed, linguistically backed research. And I might be incorrect at some places, but I feel that I am correct because I've done a lot of research and I've validated most of the things that has been seen here. And why I'm excited is because the biggest problem people face when it comes to content writing or content marketing is that they sound non-native, right? They sound like someone who does not speak English as their first language, and that becomes a big problem. And a lot of Western countries where English is their native language do not prefer writers who are not native speakers, and this kind of reduces the opportunity that you have per se. So this is basically to make you sound non-native. Again, I was having this discussion with Deepak, in fact, whether to call this video how to sound like a native writer or how not to sound like a non-native writer. Now, these things are completely different. What I'm trying to do here is not making you sound like a native writer, because frankly, I don't think you can unless you move to a country where you are surrounded with native English speakers. Now, that can be quite expensive. So the best thing to do is to lose or shed all the weight that makes you sound like a non-native writer, and in the process sound natural and very neutral. So you do not give away the fact that you're non-native. At the same time, you do not give away that you are native. So somewhere in between, when you are, it sounds very natural. It sounds just about right, and that's what you need to aim. And if you do that, most of the writers abroad, or your audience for that matter also, as a content marketer, your audience might be someone who speaks English as their first language. If you want to cater to them, how to create content for them and not give away the fact that you're a non-native speaker. So very excited to share all the things that I have researched and learned about this particular thing. So let's see what we'll be learning in this particular video. Very simple thing. 7 most common mistakes non-native writers make. I have done this with an Indian perspective. Most of the mistakes that we do here and the kind of mistakes that can be avoided, that will immediately make you sound like more like a natural native writer than anything else. So once you take care of these 7 mistakes, your the language skills, the grammatical skills improves considerably. And how to sound more natural and neutral over a period of time. So let's go one by one. The first thing that we need to talk about, and the mistake that we people do, is the subject verb object arrangement, or in simple words, the word arrangement. Now, in the English language, every sentence is either subject verb or subject verb object. It is in this exact order, which is why it makes sense in the English language. So for example, I'm going home. Here the subject is I, I'm going is the verb, home is the object. We've spoken about this in our previous videos. I'm just talking about it once more here, going through it very quickly once more. And why I'm talking about this is because most Indian languages are very flexible, because they can take the subject verb object form, or they can take the subject object verb form, or even verb subject object form. So let me give you an example. My Hindi is terrible, but I thought that I'll give this example in Hindi. मैं घर जा रहा हूँ. Now in this, मैं is subject, घर is the object, जा रहा हूँ is the verb. So it's actually in the subject verb object. घर में जा रहा हूँ, it also makes sense, which is actually object, subject and verb, and also a verb subject object. So जा रहा हूँ मैं घर. So you might have heard this kind of arrangements in a lot of songs, in a lot of movies and all of that. And just think about this particular sentence in your own language, in your own mother tongue, and you'll realize that at least most of these languages completely fall under the first category, which is मैं घर जा रहा हूँ. It sounds like that. It is structured like that, which is the subject verb object, right? Now, it works in Indian languages, this different kind of word arrangement. It works in most Indian languages because we use something called as inflection, right? We use this in the English language also, but we use it differently. When we say inflection, we stress upon certain words. We bring out the mood when we are talking in Indian languages. But the problem arises when you directly translate this into English, when you directly translate your Indian languages into English language. The word arrangement, when you translate it, it sounds all wrong. So one simple example I'll give you is, I heard someone say, I'm an expert in note taking. Although it is right, but I'm trying to somehow illustrate my point here. I would have probably structured that sentence by saying, I'm an expert in taking notes, right? So here, the subject verb object arrangement is followed according to the English rules. When you say, I'm an expert in note taking, the verb gets pushed to the end. So the object gets pushed before, so it becomes like a subject object verb word arrangement. It sounds wrong. It sounds very non-native to speak. It happens because we think that it is natural or normal for the subject object verb arrangement in English. So which is not the case, which is why it is important that you do not mess up this subject verb object arrangement. This is the biggest problem that I see when people are writing in English who are non-native writers. And this is a very easy way for people to pick out that you're not a native speaker. It is. So think about it like this, just because Indian languages are more flexible. English is a more rigid language. It is a very funny language. They have strange rules, which definitely defy logic for the most parts. So do not expect the same kind of flexibility in English. There are certain rules to be followed. So always keep it subject, verb, object, or it can be even subject verb. So which is I'm going. So it can still be a sentence, but it has to follow the subject, verb, object arrangement. So as long as you're doing that, you're absolutely fine. So don't directly translate whatever your thoughts you're having in your native language into your English language, and stop doing that in your daily usage also. The more you do that in your daily usage, the more it becomes natural for you. So try to avoid it consciously. I hope I made sense, because this is the biggest mistake that I see people do when it comes to writing in English. So just go through this entire bit once more if it's kind of confusing for you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is nominalization. Sounds very, very, heavy, but trust me, it's a very simple thing. It's basically the process of turning a verb into a noun, right? And we do that a lot, right? We do that a lot. I'll give an example. I did a lot of research for this video. Here, research is in the noun form. Now, just pause this video for a second and think about how you can make this sentence a lot more sharper, more powerful, more impactful. I can write the same sentence like this. I researched a lot for this video. Now, research is in the verb form. Now, this is called nominalization. Now, again, we do this because we are directly translating from our Indian languages. And in Indian languages, we basically add a verb to a noun because most of the times we don't have those words in our local language. So, say for example, this particular sentence, if I had to translate this in Hindi, इस वीडियो के लिए मैं बहुत research किया. So the research kiya is, the kiya part is the verb, research becomes a noun because we do not use the research word in Hindi as normally as you would in English. The same thing applies for other languages also. So do not nominalize your verbs. So the problem is you need to make your verbs do the work. If you make your nouns do the work, it does not have that much of an impact. So let's take another example which drives home this point. This paper gives an analysis of the water problem and offers a solution. Now what I've underlined is the noun form of the verbs. Just pause the video and see if you can come up with the verb form of the same sentence. Now if I did not nominalize this, I would probably write it like this. This paper analyzes and solves the water problem. Now analyzes and solves is the verb form and that's how it should be used. Now what I've done is I've made the sentence more sharper, more crisper, and more importantly, it's more impactful, right? When it says analyzes and solves the water problem, it sounds more convincing and it definitely has a lot more impact than saying offers a solution. It sounds very doubtful when you say offers a solution, but when you say solves, it kind of sounds very decisive, So that is what you need to do. You need to make your verb do the work and not make it into a noun and make it weaker. So this is very common for us. So for example, another common sentence that a lot of people say is that I did my graduation in 2010. Now, it is correct, but you can make it sound a lot more powerful, a lot more impactful by saying I graduated in 2010, right? So now you're making that into a verb and making it more punchy, if you know what I mean. So do not nominalize, do not overuse nominalization. Sometimes it is actually correct to use things like this. Say for example, in the first example, I did a lot of research for this video. I researched a lot for this video. There is nothing wrong in the first sentence. Oh, I just noticed a typo. Anyway, which is the point of this entire video. But anyway, what happens here is it is not completely wrong for me to say I did a lot of research for this video, but I can make it sound a lot better when I say I researched a lot for this video. Same thing applies for the graduation. Same thing applies for this, the example below this. So having said that, the common problem here is direct translation. You should not directly translate your mother tongue into English. When you do that, this is what happens. You either mess up the subject-verb arrangement or you nominalize your verbs. So don't do that. Try not to nominalize your verbs. Make the verbs do the work for you. The third one is words and phrases that only we use. We as Indians have developed this fantastic vocabulary of English, which is definitely used only by us. And when you use it with other people, people are like, what? Especially native speakers. I think the first most common word that we have totally invented out of thin air is prepone. Do you know that there's no word called prepone? Or prepone is not the most accurate way of saying it. So it might have been included very recently, but when you use the word prepone to a native speaker, they will not understand what it is. They will not know that the opposite of postpone is prepone. But having said that, it totally makes sense to call it prepone, right? But English is such a funny language that they have not gone with that. But the right word to use is advanced. So a lot of people do not understand when you say prepone. We use this a lot. What's your good name, right? And this is only used by Indians when we are asking people, what's your good name? the Britishers and the Americans and all the native speakers, they find this extremely intriguing and amusing because what do you mean your good name? Like my name is pretty good, like it always is, right? But my assumption is that this probably came from Bengali because they have the dark nam and the Bolonam or whatever, they have the good name and the bad name. Probably it came from Bengali and like people started like again directly translating it in English and what's your good name just like came about. And when you say this, you can just say what's your name. You don't have to say what's your good name. But I completely understand the intention behind this. Like when we Indians say it, we say it with a lot of respect. We'll say it as a form of courtesy. But having said that, this is not very commonly used or not used at all with native speakers. This myself, Neha, when you're introducing yourself, we always start with myself, and this sounds very wrong to be. It sounds very cheesy, It sounds very corny and it sounds very cheesy. So never start introducing yourself with myself. So it sounds very wrong. I think we are obsessed with the word dear. I've had a lot of clients from across the globe, and almost every single one of them used to ask me, why do you guys refer to people as dear? Now, the native speakers use the word dear when they're being affectionate towards someone, like probably their spouse or their kids or something like that. And now we address everyone as dear. Hi, how are you, dear? And all of those things. So which sounds really absurd to native speakers because you are not being affectionate towards them in that way. And when they hear someone say this, they're like, what are you saying? Like, why are you sounding like that? So it sounds like pretty off when you speak like that. So do not use the word dear. Like, I don't know why we are just obsessed with this word. We use it a lot. Again, I know the intentions are pure, but it just sounds wrong. I just wanted to give you another example, which is dice. We use the word dice a lot. It is an English word, but a lot of native speakers do not use this word. So I remember this very vividly because I was part of Toastmasters and I was introducing a speaker to come on stage who happened to be the English professor of a university, and I invited him upon the dais. I was like, XYZ, please come up on the dais. And this guy just stood there and he was like, what do you mean dais? Like, he did not know what a dais was because they don't use the word dais. They just use the word stage or a platform. Again, although this is an English word, I think we have adopted this word and we just use this very extensively, mostly in India. So again, these are most of these words might not be wrong, but these are words that we use extensively, and that kind of gives away the fact that where we come from. So if you try to like do your own research, because I'm sure that there are a lot of other words that only we use, things like this. Ensure that you don't use words like this when you're talking or when you're writing and all of that, and hopefully it should not give away that you're not a native speaker. Messing up the tenses. This is one more thing that we do a lot. The single most phrase that has been used absolutely in the most wrong way possible is I didn't knew. Like, I hear this so much, it kind of like gets me to my nerves. So it's wrong. I didn't knew is wrong. The correct is I didn't know, right? And again, one more thing I hear a lot: when did you came? When did you come is the correct way to put it across. Now, what is happening here is, since did or didn't is already in the past tense, you do not have to make the verb in the past tense. So didn't know. The know, you don't have to make it into the past tense. You don't have to make come in the past tense. So because did and didn't is already in the past tense, that is not necessary. Very, very simple rule that will make you remember is, with did or did not or didn't, the verb is always in the form of simple present. As simple as that. Whenever you're using, this is a rule that pretty much applies to every sentence. So do not mess up the tenses like this. Go back and read about the tenses, which is why I told in the beginning that do not mess up the tenses. Kind of gives away where you're coming from and if you're a native speaker or not. In fact, most native speakers also make this mistake, and it happens a lot more for us non-native speakers because we're just not used to it. But try not to mess up the tenses. It's very important. It completely changes. It sounds very weird. It sounds very absurd when you mess up the tenses. Typos. How ironic is it that I'm talking about typos and I've made a typo myself? But those kind of typos even native speakers make. And again, I'm not trying to justify myself, but what I'm trying to say here is the kind of typos that give away the fact that you're a non-native writer. Misspellings, like a lot of us write carrier instead of career. Things like this. There are a lot of typos like this, which give away. Again, these typos are also made by native speakers, but we are giving away the Grammarly subscription at a very cheap cost. So why don't you just pick it up and not make this typos misspellings rather than anything else. There, and they are. Same with your, and you are. This is something that you really, really need to understand what you're talking about. So just go through all of these things. Accept and accept. Accept is when you exclude something. Accept is when you include something or take something. So lose and lose. Lose is when something is not tight with the double O. LOSE is the present form of lost. So again, these kind of typos can easily be avoided and make you sound more professional, if not natural and native. Not using enough phrases and idioms. Now, what are idioms? Basically, a phrase or an expression that has a figurative or sometimes literal meaning. Most of the times, idioms have a very figurative meaning. They do not actually mean what they say. I'll give you an example. Example, blessing in disguise. So what does it actually mean? It's a good thing that seemed bad at first. So native English speakers use a lot of idioms and phrases like this, which kind of adds flavor to their writing, flavor to their speaking. And each native speaker, like the American, the British, probably Australian, all of them have their own phrases and idioms which they use very regularly when they're talking. And even non-native speakers use a lot of idioms. So I suggest that you try to use these idioms when you're talking or when you're writing. It adds a little bit of flavor. It adds a beautiful flavor to your writing. It makes it a lot more interesting and intriguing. I have attached a list of all the commonly used idioms across different dialects of English and different sections of English speaking countries. So just go through them and try to use them as naturally as possible, both in your daily language and as well as when you're writing. Singular and plurals. Again, how we mess up the usage of singular and plural verbs, it definitely gives away that you're a native or non-native speaker. The most common is does and do. So when the subject is plural, you have to use do. Employees do not have enough time. The employee, which is singular, does not have enough time. Have and has, all of these things have the same thing. So when it's plural, it's do. When it's employee, it's does. It's singular, it's does. So read about this singulars and plurals and how to use it and what part of the sentence you are referring to as singular and how to structure these sentences accordingly. Again, I would love to go deeper into this, but this is way beyond the scope of this particular video. But I strongly suggest that if you are confused about this particular singular and plural, please read about it, watch a few YouTube videos, and make sure that you do not make these mistakes. Now, how do you sound more natural? How do you make yourself sound a lot lesser like a non-native speaker? The number one thing that you should be doing is immersion and exposure. You need to immerse yourself in the language that you're trying to be good at, which is English in this case. And you need to expose yourself to this particular language as much as possible. When I say immerse, you need to read, listen, watch everything possible in the particular language that you're trying to master. And you need to expose yourself to talking to more people in the English language and try to expose yourself into situations where you're forced to speak in the English language. So it definitely helps in making your English language way better. And eventually, all the things that I've mentioned, you take it off, you shed some weight, and make yourself sound more natural. So immerse yourself in that particular language. The best way to do that, or to immerse yourself, is to read. It's to read and learn. I ensure that I read at least 15 to 20 minutes every day, which is not a lot. Just before you go to bed, I read. I don't read fictional books. It's just not my cup of tea. I usually read non-fictional books. You can read anything that you want. I'm not saying that you have to read a particular type of book, or I'm not saying that you should read a book at all. You can read a blog, you can read an academic paper, you can read anything that you want, but read and learn as much as possible. Make sure that you read every day. Make sure that you learn something new every day when you're reading. So it really, really helps. It takes a long time, but develop that reading habit. Luckily for me, I have been reading since, I don't know, since I was a kid, and I've been reading almost every day. So it really helps when you read as much as you can and learn and try to use the things that you have learned while you're reading in your daily language and in your writing. See, experiment with those phrases, experiment with words, experiment with the way you structure your thoughts, your sentences, everything. Third tip is you need to think in English. So there's a little man in your head, right, who's always talking to you, who's like the voice in your head. So the voice in your head is naturally hardwired to think in your natural mother tongue, right? But when you switch it consciously to English and start to consciously think more in English, like have a conversation with yourself in English, it tends to become more and more natural. You need to think in English. You need to put yourselves into a situation where you might be using English and play it out in your head. So once you start doing that, you become more and more confident. That is your experience playing it out within your brain. Your brain is amazingly powerful. I mean, the things it can do is just out of this world. So when you start thinking in English, what you're making is you're making your brain more comfortable with that language. So whenever you come across a situation where you have to talk or write in English, your brain is more comfortable. It's not stressed out. It seems very natural to it when you start thinking in English. So again, these are all long-term suggestions, and that's the only way out. And one more thing that you can do is get a mentor. There are plenty of apps out there, or you can just befriend a native speaker and try to talk to them as much as possible and see how they talk and what are the different things. I have a lot of friends from around the world, and I tend to speak to them very often, and every one of them has a different way of speaking. So I just draw inspiration from each of their ways of speaking. So if you don't have access to these guys, there are plenty of apps which allows you to have a mentor for speaking in English. Last tip is write a lot. Right? It can be emails, it can be Facebook posts, it can be Instagram captions, it can be blogs, it can be anything that you want. But write a lot. So that'll really, really help you to become very natural with it. Again, like I said, the idea of this video is not to make you sound like a native writer. It's to make you sound natural. It's to make you sound like you're not putting an effort into talking or writing this in this particular language. Again, now, if you think about it in a much deeper level, what you also need to develop is your communication skills, is your articulation skills. How do you articulate your thoughts and communicate it in a very, very effective manner? And this goes beyond language, right? It's how you communicate your thoughts and your ideas. It can be applied to any language that you speak. So once you have that right, then come down a little lower and try to write a lot. Writing helps you put all of your thoughts in a very organized way, and the more you do it, the better it gets and the easier it gets. More importantly, it becomes very natural. It becomes like a free flow. There are times where I just sat and wrote 2000 words of content without sweat, but there are times when the cursor is just blinking and I haven't written a single word. So it happens, but it becomes much more easier and much more natural to you over that period of time. So that brings us to the end of this particular video. I really hope that this particular video has helped you. And I really hope my hours and hours of research has bore some fruits. And let me know what you think about this video. Let me know if I was right, if I was wrong. What do you think about these particular perspectives that I have? Are there any more anything else that you would like me to add into this particular thing? Just send it to me on sanjay@pixeltrack.in, or you can just put it in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.